Challenges and opportunities in the production and marketing of fruit crops. In fruit crop production, there are several aspects that are different than others. It's important to be aware of those, both negative and positive. In the negative area, we look at risk as a little bit more of an issue in fruits. Weather conditions, both winter and spring frost, can be limiting to cropping, and multitude of pests have to be contended with throughout the season. Fruit crops are high input. They require a lot of labor, a lot of management, a lot of capital. And there quite often there will be several years elapsed between the time a fruit crop is planted and before you get the first harvest. And then there will be another lag period between that first harvest and when you hit full yield for that crop. In addition, fruit crops tend to be more perishable than others, and the time that you have to get a crop off the plant into market can be very narrow. On the other hand, there are some positives. Fruit production can be done profitably on smaller acreages. We can utilize land that's not necessarily suitable for many other types of traditional agriculture, such as hilly land. In fact, we seek it out for many of our fruit crops, but this is land that may be used for pasture or for cutting hay crop or for growing trees, but certainly not for conventional crop production. Fruits potentially have high returns per acre, making them a significant crop for limited acreages, and also they tend to be favored now by customers that are looking for local production of their food sources. Regardless of whether you grow trees, vines, or bushes, hopefully they live and fruit for many years. What you do this year will impact what happens next year. And so it's important to have a long-range outlook on production of these crops. How do you know what to grow in regards to fruits? First off, look at what has been grown in your area successfully. If something is not being grown there, why? Can you determine the reason for it? Is it just that nobody thought about it? If so, it could be an opportunity because there would be no competition. The returns that you would get could be fairly high. However, it could also be a red flag. The crop may have been grown, but because of lack of demand, market demand, or because of some production limitations such as cold weather for a crop like fig or apricot, it's not suited to our area, may have taken the crop out. In addition to that, realize that another limitation is the availability of supplies and equipment that are unique to fruit crop production. When you look at harvest of fruit crops, if you grow multiple crops, it's important to know when you're going to be harvesting these and making them available to your customers. And this chart hopefully will show some of the more common small fruits and tree fruits that we grow in Tennessee and the normal periods of harvest throughout the state. As you can see, strawberries, especially with plasticulture or annual strawberries, we may start harvest late April to early May, and on crops like apple or pecan, we'll be harvesting up into early November. And you can have a continuous supply of fresh fruits available to your customers at your market throughout the summer if you so choose. But you could also narrow down the time that you'd be open, and hopefully this will help you select what you want to grow. In addition to that, knowing how long it'll take to get a crop into production, how long it takes to get full production, what's the potential yield of that crop at full production, and how long should those crops be productive? How long should you expect fruiting off of those? This chart shows, again, some of the more common tree and small fruits for Tennessee, and hopefully we'll have information that will be of benefit to you as you budget for your fruit plantings. There are important operations to be conducted in an orchard, a vineyard, or a fruit planting all year long. Some of them are more timely than others, but still they're all important as we look at operations from a dormant spray, where we're putting spray on to control insects and diseases that cannot be controlled at other times of the year. Planting new trees, pruning, thinning the crop to get it down to an adjustable or a desirable size, harvest, controlling pests, and all the way up to after harvest, cleaning up the planting so that you can lessen carryover of insect and disease problems in future years. A good fruit grower that's in it for the long haul will be constantly planting new fruit trees and vines. In apples, we suggest that we plant about 3 to 5% of our trees every year once we get mature orchards. That way we've got stability. We'll have young trees and middle-aged and older trees all together. We'll not have a lag in production that would come with an orchard where the entire orchard got old. In addition to that, it helps us keep up with new varieties, new rootstocks, new training systems, and new technologies. So a constant replanting program is an essential part of an aggressive fruit production program. Look at who will be in charge of the fruit crops. Fruit crops tend to be high demand crops in regards to management as well as labor. It's unique, intense, and the person that does it needs to be committed to doing a good job. Who will be that manager? Will it be you, or will it be an employee? Regardless of who, how capable are they? Are they somebody that can learn and adapt and handle several jobs and make decisions quickly? How much time does that individual have to devote to managing the fruit operation? At certain times of the year, it's quite critical to be there at certain times, and if they're distracted, it could be a serious problem. Is this just a job, or is it a passion for the person that's managing? Hopefully it's the latter, because the interest that's needed goes beyond just a job category. And then it's quite important to have a second in command, that is a backup person, in case the manager should be ill or injured or out of the area on business or whatever. There has to be somebody on site or closely available that can make critical decisions at certain times of the year. When do you spray? What do you spray with? When do you harvest? These are things that cannot be put off. What's the labor situation? How much labor is available? Remember, we have a low level of mechanization in fruit crops. And there are some operations like thinning the fruit crop that has to be done in a relatively narrow time window to get the best response. How skilled are the laborers? Can they be left to work without supervision so you can go do something else? How consistent are they? Do you have the same people for years after year, or are you constantly getting a new crew every year to work with you? If you're getting new people all the time, you may want to avoid some of the higher technology training systems, etc., because you'll be spending too much of your time training new workers to make it worthwhile. How conscientious are the workers? Will they be gentle with the fruit? Will they be gentle with the trees, the vines? Because bruised fruit is worthless as a fresh fruit. The fruit buds can be damaged for the next year's crop if they're not careful. So you need to have people that will take care with what they're working on. As you look at the different crops, site selection, where are you going to plant, becomes a very important consideration. In fact, it's probably the most important consideration that you'll make throughout the life of the planting. Virtually everything that happens to the crop and in the marketing of that crop will be impacted, at least in part, by your selection of site. If it's from a marketing standpoint, you're selling on the farm, how accessible are you? How far are you away from your customers? How easy are you to find? If you're taking fruit to a distant market, to town, or to a farmer's market, what is the road like? What condition will the fruit be in when you get there? How long will you be off the farm? As far as growing the crop, all of our fruit crops like full sun. Elevated sites are better than low sites because of frost protection and disease protection that you get from elevation. Slopes can have an impact on how the crop fares. Steepness of slopes, the safety aspect in working in the fields on times when the weather conditions and the ground conditions are not necessarily favorable. What are the soils like? Are they well drained internally and on the surface? Are they fairly deep? Do you have good rooting depth? We like to see at least 30 inches if possible. What are they like as far as fertility? We don't need highly fertile soils. We can supply the fertilizers to get the growth we need. Water is an increasingly important aspect. How much water is available for the crop? What's the quality of the water? How prevalent are wildlife in the area? Do you need to plan for a deer fence? Do you need to plan for bird netting? Those are things that can be fairly costly. It's best to budget for them up front. And then what's happening next door? If you're adjacent to an agricultural operation, be aware of what's going on, because that can have an impact on how you manage the crops and parts of your farm. What are you growing? What are the needs for cross-pollination? Do you need to have multiple varieties and intermingled in the planting so that you get good cross-pollination? For small fruits like strawberries, blackberries, raspberries, and bunch grapes, it's not an issue. You don't need cross-pollination. For muscadine grapes, you may if you're planting female flowered varieties. For rabbit-eye blueberries, you should have cross-pollination. For high bush, it's not essential, but it's better if you do. For tree fruits, tree nuts, yes, you need cross-pollination. For peaches, for nectarines, you don't. For plums, for sweet cherries, you may, depending on variety. Planting versus planting. The success or failure of a fruit crop is quite often determined before the plants are ever set in the ground. It's important to realize this. A critical year in production is the one prior to planting. Don't cut corners. Spend time, a year or more, selecting the site, preparing the site, soil test, adjust pH, phosphorus and potassium levels, eliminate noxious weeds, get rid of barriers to air and water movement. When you select the plants and purchase the plants, go to reputable nurseries. Don't compromise on varieties and rootstocks. It may be worth your time to spend an extra year to get the plants and the quality plants that you want, or to custom propagate, to contract with a nursery to grow you what you want. This is a timeline on vineyard establishment, but timelines for other fruit crops would look very similar. The pre-plant time is where we're spending time selecting and developing the site, ordering the plants, and preparing to plant. Once the plants go in the ground, we're building the framework of the plant so when it does start to fruit, it can have a decent crop and it can support that crop. Evaluate the market constantly because it's changing. Look at retail versus wholesale. Consider things such as agritourism, pick your own, and availability of value-added materials to attract more people to your market. You can take fruit that would be wasteful or cull fruit, and in many cases you can utilize it in value-added things like bakeries or juice. Look for new information regularly. Contact your county extension office if you need help, have questions in production. They may be able to help you or know of people that can help you. Go online and look at sources of information there. There are several different sources that give you information on pest control. They're evaluated and updated every year and are there for your use. The fruit production can be a viable way to make a living, but it's not one that should be entered into lightly. Good preparation will definitely pay dividends in the long run.